This is Brett, 21 years old, college student, All-American athlete, but like so many others before him, Brett has begun to struggle with major depression, to the point where one night it gets so severe that he begins hearing voices telling him to kill himself. He's taken to a nearby hospital, and the following morning, his nurse arranges to have him transferred to a psychiatric facility. When EMS arrives, they receive report from the nurse who says that Brett has been the perfect gentleman, compliant, very polite with the staff, no problem for any of them whatsoever. But the ER physician continues to perceive him as a flight risk because he was admittedly suicidal. The EMTs go into Brett's room, introduce themselves, and take Brett out to the ambulance. In the back of the ambulance, the attending EMT secures Brett's wrists to the ambulance stretcher using a pair of soft restraints. The driver gets up in the front, and so begins their journey. So far, this trip is indistinguishable from thousands of others just exactly like it. It's run-of-the-mill, it's perhaps you might say mundane or even boring. We've all run dozens and dozens of these trips, perhaps even more. But like Murphy's Law states, if something can go wrong, eventually it will. About 10 or 15 minutes into their trip, Brett looks over at the EMT who is seated on the bench seat right next to Brett, and he says, I don't want to sound rude, but having you sit right next to me like that is making me very uncomfortable. Would you mind to sit in the chair that's back behind me? And the EMT says, oh, sure, no problem. And he gets up and moves to the captain's chair, positioned behind Brett. Well, a few minutes pass, and the EMT looks up and sees that Brett is standing straight up in the back of the ambulance with both wrists free of the restraints. He quickly grabs hold of Brett, trying to keep him inside the moving ambulance. The driver up front hears the commotion, pulls over to the shoulder of the road, and radios for help. Brett manages to break away, exits the back doors, goes across 7 lanes of interstate traffic, and seemingly on to freedom. Now, it just so happened that there was an off-duty police officer nearby who sees all of this and gives chase. He catches up with Brett in 10-15 minutes or so, and once he's had a chance to talk with Brett and get him to calm down, he begins to walk him back toward the waiting ambulance that is parked on the shoulder of the road by the interstate. Well, they get just a few steps away from the road when Brett suddenly pulls away from the officer, steps into oncoming traffic, and is struck by an oncoming pickup. "18 months later, the attending EMT who had ridden in the back of the ambulance with Brett finds himself standing in a courtroom where a jury has just declared him grossly negligent and has awarded Brett's family a $1 million judgment. Now, perhaps you're asking yourself the very same question that entered my mind the first time I heard this story. Why gross negligence? Was the jury's decision based on their belief that the EMT had an obligation to keep Brett in the back of the ambulance at any cost? Was the escape itself the problem? Or did the jury feel that the EMT had improperly restrained and then improperly monitored the restraints? You see, the jury felt that the EMT had made at least 2 grave errors. The first of which was, in their estimation, improperly or incompetently applying the restraint device itself. Now, I have no knowledge of what particular restraint device was used in this case, nor do I know how it was used, if the EMT followed the manufacturer's instructions. What the background is on that, I just simply don't know. Regardless, the jury felt that the EMT had acted incompetently. Secondly, the standard of care then and now dictates that any time we restrain a patient, we must at all times maintain an unobstructed view of the restrained extremities and the restraints. The EMT had breached his duty when he moved from the bench seat, a position that offered him a clear view of the restraints, to the captain's chair behind Brett, where, with Brett positioned in the semi-Fowler's position, completely blocked his view of both of Brett's wrists. And the jury felt that if not for those two decisions, Brett's death arguably could have been prevented. And I can't help but wonder, if not but for the grace of God, could something like this happen to you or I? Have you ever transported a psychiatric suicidal patient? Have you ever seen a patient escape from a restraint device? 3 out of 4 EMTs and paramedics say they have witnessed just such an event. Now, this number is far too large to be dismissed as a simple handful of EMTs and paramedics that just need some remedial training in the use of physical restraints. This is a surefire sign that we have a system-wide problem in EMS. EMS as an industry has failed us, failed you, when it comes to restraint education and the restraint devices available to us. I'm sure the EMT in this case would tell you that all it takes is just one bad day. He wasn't trying to do something reckless. He wasn't trying to cause harm to his patient. He simply made an error, an honest mistake. It was just one bad day, and his career was over.